You do not fall for the watch first. You fall for the version of you that appears the second the bracelet clicks shut. The salesman closes the clasp like he's done this 1,000 times. Cold steel settles on your wrist, and you look up at the mirror before you mean to. Your shoulders rise a little. Your jaw unclenches. 5 minutes ago, you came in carrying street rain, a buzzing phone, and the feeling that other men get taken seriously faster than you do. Now the glass gives you a cleaner first impression, more composed, more difficult to dismiss. The watch has not changed your life. It has changed the social signal on your body. It suggests order, taste, control, the kind of man who gets heard in the room before he repeats himself. So you turn your wrist under the lamp again. You are not checking the time. You are checking whether that man could be you. The strange part happens before he even checks the price. He slips the watch on, looks up, and the man in the mirror seems a half step more composed than he feels. That gap matters. He hesitates because he knows steel cannot fix a life. Still, the weight on his wrist changes his posture. The clasp snaps shut, and his hand settles on the glass like it belongs in boardrooms, not inbox panic. In 2 seconds, he can picture Monday. Firmer handshake, cleaner cuff, one less apology. He is not responding to mechanics alone. He is responding to identity rehearsal. The watch offers a believable version of himself, and for one charged minute, he wants to deserve it. The air conditioner is loud enough to feel like judgment. Your notebook is already open. 3 faces across the table are waiting. Your mouth goes dry. Under the table, your thumb finds the watch on your wrist. Cold steel, sharp case edge, one small click when you center it. No one else notices, but your nervous system does. The weight gives your body a simple instruction before confidence shows up. Sit taller, slow down, answer one sentence at a time. The watch cannot supply competence. It cannot rescue a bad idea. But it can loan your body a little authority until your mind catches up. Your first line still trembles. Your second answer lands flat and clean. At the glass case, his hand stops on the watch that feels familiar. Not the one that looks best. It has the same tight steel bracelet that lived in his father's dresser, the same gold face an uncle wore while carving meat at Sunday dinner. Maybe even the same silent promise from old ads. A man should look calm, pressed, on time, in control. So when he buys a mechanical watch, he may be trying to recover more than style. He may be trying to prove he can be that kind of man when life feels less certain than it did on those wrists. The watch does not just mark hours. It gives him a posture, a tone, a steadier hand at the cuff. He does not check the hour first. He checks himself. In the gray quiet, the watch sits beside his keys and wallet, like a version of the man he is about to become. Fingers on the crown, a little resistance, a few turns. His breathing evens out. Then, leather under skin, clasp shut, cuff lowered. The bills are still on the counter. The meeting will still test him. But the ritual has already done its job. It narrows the static. It turns free-floating anxiety into sequence, posture, readiness. By the time he sees his wrist in the mirror, he is not calmer because life improved. He is calmer because he has rehearsed control in a form he can wear. The strange part starts after the no. In the boutique, you are only flirting with the idea. Then the dealer gives that calm smile, turns the tray, and says there is a list. You leave with empty hands, but not an empty mind. On the walk home, the watch feels less like a product and more like a gate. You check the message again. Not available. No timeline. Your brain reads the refusal as social information. If they will not place it on your wrist, maybe the wrist is the test. The watch stops meaning taste and starts meaning admission. A passing maybe hardens into a private campaign. You imagine the clasp, the glance from others, the version of you who gets let in. Denial does not reduce desire. It fuses the watch to self-worth. By midnight, he is not checking prices. He is building permission. After the boutique brush-off and the waitlist silence, 3 resale tabs glow like a courtroom for his impulse. Blue lines rise, red dips start to look merciful. A calculator taps beside a cold mug. He whispers retention, spread, downside, like adult passwords. The terms slow his breathing. They sound cleaner than the real confession. I want that watch because I think it will tighten my posture, sharpen my mornings, make me look harder to ignore. So he assembles evidence. Historic floor, limited supply, easy exit. Then his finger stalls above buy now. Jaw tight, He refreshes the chart one more time, just to make the feeling look earned. Status gets louder when almost nobody notices. At dinner, the room is busy with faces, phones, plates, the check, half-heard stories, bigger laughs. Your watch is hidden under the cuff until you reach for your glass and the sleeve drifts back. Across the table, one man pauses, not because it is shiny, because he recognizes the choice. His eyes drop, return, and he gives that tiny nod collectors give each other when they know you did not buy for applause. No speech, no performance, just a brief signal that you belong in a narrower room. That private acknowledgement can hit harder than open praise because mass attention is cheap. Recognition from someone inside the code is status with the volume turned down. The morning he starts packing his life into boxes, he reaches for the watch before he answers anything. The lease is ending. Her messages have stopped. At work, he is trying to sound certain while his future feels rented by the month. In the bathroom mirror, even his face looks less convinced. But the watch does not negotiate with any of that. Same weight on the wrist, same cold clasp, same quiet sweep beside his pulse. That consistency calms a private fear that stress is turning him into someone scattered, needy, temporary. So when he looks down, he is not really checking the hour. He is checking whether discipline, composure, and self-respect still show up with him. You do not buy the watch on the easy week. You buy it after the scan comes back clean, after the race bib is crumpled on the desk, after payroll hits and the promotion is finally real. In that quiet room, opening the box does something subtle. It turns a shaky win into a fixed point. The purchase stops feeling reckless and starts feeling allowed. Not because the metal changes, but because you need a way to certify the person who got through it. The watch keeps that version of you from slipping back into doubt. Then the clasp snaps shut. The result is no longer just a memory. It sits on your wrist, solid enough to touch on an ordinary Tuesday. Late at night, he's no longer comparing prices. He's training his eye. In bed, phone inches from his face, he studies bevels, lug drop, dial spacing, old reference numbers. On the forums, strangers correct each other with surgical confidence. Too thick, wrong handset, better movement, even if the caseback stays closed. He saves the comments that sting because they sound like standards. After a while, the watch is not just something to own. It becomes proof he can notice what other people miss. So at dinner, when someone mentions a new release, he does not say expensive. He says unbalanced, overpolished, historically lazy. Heads lift. People listen. For a moment, knowledge does what money alone cannot. It turns preference into rank. 7 days after the delivery rush, the watch already feels like furniture. It is still in the open box, still catching the lamp, already ordinary. You lift it, turn it in your fingers, and wait for that first jolt to return. Nothing. In the bathroom mirror next morning, the old question is back before your shirt is buttoned. Am I enough now? The watch did its part. It kept time. It looked expensive. People noticed. But it could not speak for you in the meeting, loosen your shoulders, or settle the knot under your ribs. So late that night, your phone lights up your face. A rarer listing appears. The drop tells the truth. You are shopping for the moment you walk into that glass room without checking anyone's reaction. The moment that changes the watch is almost absurdly small. Tuesday morning, train window, a fresh scratch by the bezel. Your stomach tightens. You remember how carefully you used to place your wrist, how much this thing was supposed to say about you. Then the doors open, people shove past, and the day takes you back. Grocery bags bite your fingers. Sanitizer dries on your skin. Office light hits the crystal. Rain dots it at the crosswalk. Later, a child grabs your hand and keeps walking. The watch is still there, marked and working. That is when it changes. It stops trying to upgrade you. It simply stays with the life already in your hands. I thought I was buying steel, weight, and a cleaner face in the mirror. Then the rush thinned out. The box went in a drawer, the watch stayed on my wrist. It was there at the desk, on late trains, in the pause before a small apology, across tired dinners, and on one quiet morning when I fastened it and felt like myself without performing it. That was the real change. The scratches started to matter more than the price. Wearing it every day mattered more than being seen in it. I hadn't bought a new man in the mirror. I had bought something that stayed long enough to see who I was becoming.